Our guest today graduated Phi Beta Kappa from the University of Illinois, and then, as I mentioned, father, from Loyola University School of Law. On November 3rd, 1998, George Ryan and our guest speaker today were elected governor and lieutenant governor of Illinois. She made history by becoming Illinois' first woman lieutenant governor. She began her career in public service over 20 years ago. Known as an effective advocate for women and children, her experience includes service as a state representative, attorney, and community activist, as well as a wife and mother. As a breast cancer survivor, she is dedicated to improving health care for women. Together with Governor Ryan, she has worked to double funding for the State Office of Women's Health, expanding health education and outreach efforts, and making a program for low-cost breast and cervical exams available to more women throughout Illinois. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the City Club of Chicago, Lieutenant Governor Corinne Wood.
Thank you very much, President Doherty, for your very kind introduction. And let me say what a pleasure it is to be back here addressing the City Club this afternoon. And as you might imagine, recent events in America have had a great impact, not only on what officials are talking about, but also about what we're thinking of. So I'd like to spend the bulk of my time today speaking directly to our current economic crisis and my plans for bringing us safely through it. But before I do that, I do want to give you just a little brief background in my career as an attorney, as a public servant, as a state legislator, and as Illinois' first female lieutenant governor. I've often said that I got involved in public service not because I served in government or because I'm an attorney. In fact, I usually refer to myself as a recovering attorney. But it was truly my community service that spurred my faith into returning to public service. I ran for office because I saw that a few people with a strong commitment can really make a difference. I didn't come up through the normal political channels. I wasn't born to a political family. I didn't study political science. And I didn't come up from smoke-filled back rooms. So when the state representative seat became available in my area, I ran and I won. And in the legislature, I was fortunate to sponsor more bills that were signed into law than any other freshman representative. I was able to get people to sit around the table and to come together and to get the job done. And I've taken that same approach as lieutenant governor. I haven't been sitting around waiting for the phone to ring. I've managed to revolutionize the office of lieutenant governor, at the same time coming in under budget every year and returning nearly $1 million to the state. That's for Tom Roser. And because of my experiences as a lawyer, as a general counsel to the Commissioner of Banks and Trust Companies, and as lieutenant governor, I do understand the meaning of fiscal conservatism. I understand how to put programs together but still managing a tight budget. And I understand how to prioritize our budget monies in order to get the best and the most comprehensive services without taking money out of the taxpayers' pockets. In Illinois, because of sound economic planning over the last 3 years, we're in a stronger position now. Because of Illinois First, a $12 billion program to rebuild our roads, our mass transit, and our schools. Because of Illinois Venture Tech, a $1.5 billion program to help enhance technology here in Illinois. Our tax incentive programs, whether it's an EDGE tax credit, TIF districts, extending the enterprise zones, all enacted to make sure that we improve the financial environment for doing business here in Illinois. And over the last few years, working with the business community, we've had more than $4 billion in private investment come to Illinois, spurring 32,000 new jobs and 30,000 more openings. Yes, Illinois is a good place to do business. And because of this firm foundation, we will weather these shifting economic winds. But there's still work to be done. The events of 2 weeks ago have changed the world as we know it forever. Our hearts go out to the families, to the victims of these cowardly acts of terrorism, and to the many heroes of this country. They've made us strong in the face of these threats. In many ways, this tragedy has shown us the best of our American spirit. Volunteers giving their time, their blood, their financial resources. This has truly been the silver lining in this dark cloud. And I want to say to everyone who has come together, thank you. In the coming months and even years, as our country and as our people recover, we'll be facing many challenges. As a candidate for governor, I believe that it is my responsibility to talk to you about how I would respond to these challenges. And while the president and our national leaders are planning for our physical security, I believe it is also important that we move on, get back to business, and plan now to assure our economic security. There's no doubt that we're facing a shifting economy. And in the wake of this disaster, we face trying economic times. But we can overcome this. These times require leadership, someone with broad experience, someone with unbounded energy, and someone with the resolute tenacity to get the job done. I won't give up. I won't give in, not to fear, not to terrorists, and not to a struggling economy. We need to proceed cautiously, but make no mistake about it. We need to proceed. We need to go on, and we must focus on reviving our economy. I think it's safe to say that this revival needs to start right here in Illinois. As individuals, we're all getting back to the business of living our lives, returning to our jobs, returning to coffee shops, bookstores, clothing stores, and restaurants. And our next governor will need to take charge of the situation. Now, more than ever, we need a strong economic agenda for Illinois. Last week, I called upon Congress to pass a financial assistance package for our crippled airline industry. Not because our government should be bailing out a struggling industry, but because 2 weeks ago began an extraordinary time. And extraordinary times demand extraordinary measures. And we've learned that the support for the airlines is more than just about passengers and gates. It's about jobs. And that's why I'll continue to support the expansion at O'Hare Airport. Because O'Hare Airport is more important now than ever before It is the economic engine that drives our city, our state, and our region. It powers tourism, the convention industry, the restaurants, the shops, and the businesses, big and small. It's the linchpin, the key to the employment of hundreds of thousands of people throughout this state, and we cannot afford to sit still or to play politics with it, and I will not. And it's the same with Peatone. If we build it, they will come. Today, people aren't flying unless they have to. They're canceling vacations. And some major corporations like Hallmark have banned corporate travel until further notice. They're nervous and they're uncertain. But I know this, that this country and this state and this city will overcome. And it's already started. With prayer vigils, flying the American flag, people reaching out to strangers, we will overcome, and we will come back, and people will get back in our planes. I want to start now by showing the world that our restaurants are open, our buildings are safe, our trade convention centers are ready, our planes are flying, and that Chicago and Illinois are ready to welcome them back. And I'm proposing that we reallocate our tourism dollars to where they're most needed, so we can tell the world right now that we're ready, that we're safe, and we're open for business. Because visitors in Chicago want to be eating with friends here at Maggioni's, at Harry Carey's. They want to be jogging along the Lakeshore Drive and shopping along Michigan Avenue. So let's step forward on tourism. And with the same commitment as governor, I'll continue with the planned expansion of McCormick Place. Chicago is the #1 convention destination in the world, and we need to bring business back to Chicago, and we need to bring doing business back to Chicago. With their national and international conventions, industries, from hardware to restaurants, from autos to high tech, do business here in Chicago. And if Chicago is going to remain the #1 convention destination, we have to stay ahead of the curve with our facilities. And that means continue the expansion at McCormick Place. So when convention business does return to normal, we'll be ready. And we need to continue to make this city and this state ready for the needs of the 21st century. The vision of Illinois First is to improve our infrastructure, and not only to get up to modern day standards, but to be ready for future standards. We had the insight to start Illinois First when we had good economic times. And the work we've done will pay off. It'll help buffer the dips in our economy. But with Illinois First projects, we may have to proceed cautiously. But again, we have to proceed. We must carefully monitor how new projects are started so we don't outstrip our bonding authority. But we cannot let this stall because the economy could be stifled. We must also pay attention to individual businesses that have been hardest hit. We can begin by calling upon the existing state programs, such as the Illinois Development Finance Authority, which is available to offer emergency low-interest loans to industries affected by tragedy. IDFA, like the rest of Illinois, is ready and willing to step in and shoulder some of the burden. This tragedy really does put things in perspective. We as a state, we as a country, we have to think of ourselves as a family now. One big family. And like so many of the heroes this past week, we need to take care of each other. For all the workers who have been and will be displaced, I'm recommending a shift in our job training monies towards the industries that are hardest hit. And I also propose that we better utilize the resources state government has for businesses in trouble. Currently, after an industry falters or a company closes down, we send in all kinds of state government services, from specialized task forces to grants, loans, and other economic bailouts. I'm proposing that we refocus some of those resources to an Illinois early warning system. So instead of waiting until after the failure, businesses can call upon for government assistance at the first signs of trouble. It's a positive approach to saving jobs in Illinois and another way in which we can really overcome a rough economy. We as a state must marshal those resources and focus on targeting industries that have been hit the hardest. And to continue our economic growth, I'll propose job creation teams. These teams are going to be geared for specific businesses, from manufacturing and technology to retail and financial services, to help our businesses continue to prosper. And those of us in state government are going to have to do our part as well. As the financial forecasts unfold, we're going to have to look at ways to tighten our belts. That means establishing accountability in state government by developing performance review standards and evaluating how our limited dollars can be best spent. It's been clear for at least a year now that we've been heading into some rough economic times. But it's equally clear that on September 11th, those hijackers, those terrorists, tried to push this economy over the edge. My message to you today is that we have to push back. And as governor, I will, because Corinne Wood means business. I spoke earlier today about the heroes from this tragedy. Many people made sacrifices, and too many made the ultimate sacrifice. You've probably all heard the story of Todd Beamer, who was a passenger on the ill-fated United Flight 93 from Newark that went down in Pennsylvania. He and his fellow passengers took action. They saw their plight, and they gave their lives to stop the terrorists from hitting their intended target. Todd Beamer's final words, heard by an airphone operator before he and his fellow passengers performed one of the most heroic acts in our country, were, "Okay, guys, are you ready? Let's roll." In the aftermath of this tragedy, and as we face our struggling economy, let us honor Todd Beamer and the many other American heroes, not by being timid, but by taking action to keep our economy strong. And in their memory, today, I say to all of you who are working to rebuild our city and our state and our lives, okay, guys, are you ready? Let's roll. I do want to thank you very much for inviting me here today, and now we'll be made available for questions. If you could step to the microphone, please.
Good afternoon, Lieutenant Governor. My name is Bill Wally with the Chicago Multicultural Dance Center in the Bryant Valley, Chicago. We all feel in the arts that the recent events make a place for the arts in a sense, continuing the meaningfulness of our lives, and also the Tourism and Entertainment Foundation in Chicago. So it wasn't a big part of your talk about the economy, but I wanted to ask you a little bit about your support for the arts and continuing support for the Illinois Arts Council, which has done a great job and benefited from that. And we also see some need for expanding its programs into the community, reaching out to bring children, in our case, into dance and into other performing arts. Can you comment on that, please?
Sure. I think your point is very well taken. When we talk about expanding and strengthening our economy, it's not just starting new businesses. It's all the support services we need to make sure we have a strong economy. That includes tourism, and whether it's sports or arts or theater, that's all part of bringing people to either downtown Chicago or to our state. In the last several years, I think we've been very supportive of the arts industry and the Arts Council. And I have seen firsthand the important role that art does play in reviving an economy. And the example I'm going to give you is from a program that's called the Illinois Main Street Program. It's a program where we're revitalizing downtowns. And it's based on bringing new jobs to downtowns across Illinois, on historic preservation, and bringing people again downtown. And while the first step may be to attract the businesses, the second step to renovate the buildings, in order to bring the people downtown, do you know what's been most effective? Arts festivals, renovated theaters with audiences. That's what's bringing the people back to those downtowns and reviving their struggling economy. So I believe that the arts, the theaters, the sports activities are all part of this big tourism picture that really is about a $23 billion a year industry here in Illinois.
Thank you so much. Corinne, I was very encouraged to hear about reining in some of the spending practices of the state, knowing full well there are going to be numerous people laid off. Increased taxes or spending can be additional burdens. In less than a decade, our state budget has gone from $26 billion to $53 billion. If you could enumerate or illustrate a few more leadership ideas you have to rein in the growth of state government, I'd appreciate it. Thanks.
I think first and foremost, we have to demand some accountability in government, something that has concerned me as I became lieutenant governor is our attempts to try and establish performance standards. How can we evaluate if we're doing a good job if we don't know what our goals are? How can we measure if we're being successful if we have no measurements in place? And while some of the state agencies have adopted performance review standards, there are still many that are struggling with the concept. And for all of you in the private sector, you're asked each and every day to evaluate whether or not you're productive, whether or not you're putting your resources in the best place, whether or not your business will ultimately be a success. So I think first of all, we have to require some accountability and some measurement in state government. As you know, state government also funds a whole host of social service programs and infrastructure, what we call human infrastructure programs. If we're going to be having less resources because of our changing economy, then I believe it's our responsibility to make sure that those resources are best spent. In order to do that, we're going to have to set up some type of evaluation to see when we're funding these various programs, which ones really work. I think we also have to look at the fact that despite our budget growing rapidly in the last couple of years, it's been tied almost directly to the successes of our economy. And as our economy grows, and as our, we call them surpluses grow, so the spending grows. I think we're going to have to exert some very serious discipline in the next couple of years.
Lieutenant Governor, because I'm sitting with Bill Hood of American Airlines, brings to mind this question. Are you in favor of the federal government taking over the screening at the airports?
I read, I think it was just yesterday or the day before, that the federal government is thinking about taking over the security screening at the airports. And while I'm hesitant because of the high price tag associated with this, these are extraordinary times. And I do believe that to get people flying again, they want to feel safe. And so if by having the federal government assist in making sure we have consistent standards so that people will fly the friendly skies again, then I'd support it.
Jeff Berkowitz, host and producer of Public Affairs, airing every Monday night on Channel 21 at 8:30 p.m.
Good to see you again.
Good to see you, Lieutenant Governor. Lieutenant Governor Wood was our guest last night on the show that aired last night. You talked about measurement in terms of, I think, the growth of government and the importance of that. And I think you acknowledge just now that the rate of growth in the budget has been fairly significant in the last 3 years. By my count, it's about 30%. And you tied that to the growth in the economy. And I know as Lieutenant Governor, you didn't necessarily control all of that the governor and the state legislature had something to say about that. But nevertheless, looking back, would you say that rate of growth in state spending was excessive? Because notwithstanding the good economy, notwithstanding the tax revenue that was flowing in, you would agree, I'm sure, that it wasn't necessary to use all that money for the growth in state spending. And two, looking forward, are there any parameters that you would set as governor that you would like to see in terms of growth of state spending? 3%, 4%, or 10%?
First of all, in response to your first question, it's always easy to look back in hindsight and say, gee, we grew too fast, we grew too slow, we didn't put our dollars in the right places. I think for many of the programs that were funded in the last several years, they were programs in areas that needed to be addressed. For example, in the previous 8 years, I don't believe there was an inch of new road that was laid. Yet I think everyone in the Chicagoland area would agree that we needed to resurface and repair our roads and our bridges, that we needed to invest in mass transit and our infrastructure during these good economic times. So for some of those programs, yes, I do think those were the right thing to do. But I also believe that we could have used greater oversight. In the General Assembly, from whence I came, we have programs called member initiatives. There's several $100 million every year earmarked for member initiatives. Are they important? Yes. And does each state legislator better able to identify what their specific needs are in their district? Yes. But what concerns me is that for several hundred millions of these dollars, there's no real airing, there's no real public process to review these programs. So while a swimming pool might be very important in one district and might be their highest priority, in another district, they may not have clean water. And I think that if we're going to have tougher economic times, we need to bring some sort of oversight, some sort of review to programs like the Member Initiative Program. Also, in the last couple of years, through the Statewide Performance Review Program, we've begun to establish some of the accountability in state government. And I have to tell you, it was one of the programs I was most excited about when I became Lieutenant Governor, because we were going to, by goodness, get those agencies to identify what their goals are, to see if they could meet their goals, become more efficient and more effective. And I can tell you, it has been the slowest process ever. But that's why I believe we have to have someone who's really committed to continuing that. In terms of projecting what rate of growth could occur, I wish I had a crystal ball. But I can tell you that philosophically, regardless of what happens with our economy, that people, I believe, are in a better position to spend their dollars and to spend them more wisely than government necessarily does. Is there a role for government? Absolutely. Whether it's education, transportation, support for some of our more fragile citizens, absolutely. But I also believe that individuals can spend those dollars more wisely, invest them better on their own without the government.
Hi, I'm Julie Cruz from Chicago Women in Trades, and I wanted to thank you, Corinne, for all the great work you've done with the Governor's Commission on the Status of Women to make sure that women benefit equally in the economic development in our state. And I had a question related to that in terms of your thinking in the future. Well, Illinois has had great success in moving many recipients off the welfare rolls. We have also seen that this doesn't necessarily mean that women and their families are moving out of poverty. And with the federal TANF reauthorization and the focus on next steps in this arena, I was wondering what you envisioned in Illinois to ensure that women and children in the state do rise out of poverty in the context of the 60-month limit on TANF running out.
Okay. I'm very proud of the record our state has in moving people off welfare and into work. I think most of us will support people working, people being educated, people supporting their families. But it doesn't mean that it happens overnight, or perhaps not even in 60 months. And while we've had tremendous success in moving people to self-sufficiency, as was mentioned, it's not exactly an easy road. A lot of these individuals who now are working are still in minimum wage jobs. It's very difficult for them to support their family. And for many of the households that are headed up by women with children, it's extremely difficult. And it's why I believe that if you're going to be successful in moving people from welfare to work, you can't just say you've got 60 months. You've got to provide some of the support services so that people can learn or be trained with the support services that are necessary. That means education, that means transportation, and something that I fought for very vigorously in the General Assembly was subsidized childcare. Because I've said that no mother is going to go to work, even if she gets education credits and transportation credits, if she's leaving her children at home and she doesn't have appropriate childcare. And what's interesting to see is as our welfare to work numbers have gone from high to low, the amount of dollars that our state is committed to helping subsidize child care have gone from low to high. And I do believe it's important to continue these support services so that people can indeed not only become working, but they can move out of poverty into good paying jobs.
Hello, Lieutenant Governor. Kevin Jackson, Chicago Rehab Network. And we too appreciate your support for the donations tax credit that recently passed in Illinois for affordable housing. But it constantly is coming up in our articulation about Illinois government and its role in housing. It seems conspicuously absent when we talk about child care, transportation, and education. You mentioned the minimum wage workers. Today, a minimum wage worker in the state of Illinois is going to have to work nearly 100 hours a week to afford housing in the state. And we continually see with the new census how the disparity of what housing real estate costs are in the region as well as throughout the state are continuing to grow, and it undermines the foundation I hear you trying to lay. So we're very interested in your leadership in talking about how we're going to have policies that are coordinated with the housing policy linked to education and employment pieces. You're just talking with the workers, for instance. We want to make sure that we're able to talk with you and hear some of your responses on making sure affordable housing is part of the equation in the next leadership.
There's no doubt that housing is another one of the components. Whether or not you're talking education, transportation, housing, childcare. Sometimes for some of the folks working off of welfare, it's substance abuse counseling. And each situation is all a little bit different, but these are all areas that need to be addressed if we want to continue on with our goal of moving people from welfare to work. Again, we're looking at a system that was built over several decades and perhaps several generations. I think it's amazing the progress that's been made in just a few short years. But when that 60-month time period ends, it doesn't mean the floor should drop out. It means that we should be able to provide some support so we can continue on with the goal of making sure these people are employed. And there is a great housing need here in the Chicagoland area, affordable housing need. And I know it's one of the issues that's being worked on and discussed at Metropolis 2020. It's a board that I sit on that's looking at a whole host of issues that are facing our Chicagoland region. So we'll look forward to continuing to work with you.
Yes. One more question.
All right, last question.
Let's see what's at our table.
Yes, my name is Anthony Coleman.
She's on the board of directors.
Yeah, got to do that.
Thank you very much, Jay. Lieutenant Governor, I've worked for Haymarket Center, I'm vice president there, and we've made your substance abuse treatment program. I'm sure you're aware of our good service under my senior nation, McDermott.
Yes.
And one of the concerns is that you talk about the welfare to work and the TANF population, what have you, that the people who are left on those roles now are really the hard-to-reach population, which typically means, in many cases, they have substance abuse problems. And we try to address that, and we think we're doing a reasonably good job at Haymarket, but we are having extreme difficulty, not just with this mic, but we're having extreme difficulty because we did not get a significant increase in our cost of doing business. As a matter of fact, some people would interpret the increase as zero. We got like 2% that starts in April, which is I guess that's about 0.50% for the year. Yet and still, we have increased costs in our utility bills, increased costs in our gasoline bills, increased costs in our health insurance premiums for our workers. They expect to get some type of increase in pay. In order for us to retain good employees, we need to be able to do that. So we're struggling. So I know about Illinois First, and I think some good things to pave roads and build buildings where they need to be built and things of that nature. But I'm very much concerned as a human service provider in building the infrastructure of human beings. And I wonder, what is your thoughts about how can we do a better job to build human beings here in Illinois who are suffering, particularly under the bondage of addiction?
I think you're absolutely right. When we talk about people moving off the welfare rolls, those that were most able to get a job to support their families, we've worked with and we provided the support system for. And some of the people that are now remaining on the rolls are probably our toughest challenge. And you're absolutely right. In many cases, it may be a substance abuse problem, an alcoholism problem, or some other type of mental illness. And for those people, we've got to marshal our resources so that we hopefully can continue on with our goals. I'm very sympathetic regarding, we call them COLAs in state government, the cost of living adjustments for our human services providers. I chair a cabinet called the Family and Children Leadership Cabinet, where we're looking at how families' lives are changing under our new society. And we have mostly private individuals on this board. In fact, most of them are social service and human service providers. It's no coincidence that we have no government agencies on this board. And we've asked them, what do we need to do to help you address the needs of the folks that you're serving? And consistently, they say what we need is to be able to pay our workers a decent amount of money so we don't have to continually be worrying about turnover, about retraining our individuals, so that we have some consistency in our delivery of services. And something we talk to them about is having multi-year service contracts. Right now, you have to get a new contract generally every year. That requires paperwork, a lot of time, and taking people away from what their real mission is. So we have started at least a pilot program to get into the whole issue of multi-year service contracts. And that's one way in which I think we can address the COLA issue. The other best advice I could give you is, as was done over the last several years, when no cost of living adjustment had been given to a number of our service providers, is they descended upon Springfield. They called their legislators, their representatives, and they made sure their voices were heard. And they had a very telling story. And when you hear what some of these individuals make in terms of salary, and yet some of the responsibilities that they have, in some cases under the most difficult circumstances, I think it was a very effective way to reach many, many legislators who literally called for a COLA increase on the House floor and on the Senate floor. It's something that we're going to continually struggle with. But I do believe that if we can more effectively manage our resources, perhaps we'll have more resources to give in terms of COLAs.
Thank you very much for your support.
Good.
Thank